This is the weekly catch-up episode where I sow the seeds for the week ahead. I will also be talking specifically about Sunday, but before I do that, I really want to go into the planetary picture as it's emerging from Sunday the 16th right the way through to Saturday the 22nd. What is so big that we must know about? What might trip us up? What could expand us? Where might we be feeling most emotional? Where might we need a bit more rest? All of those questions hopefully are going to be answered as I go through this and giving you everything that you need to know ahead of time to have a bloody great week. And that's really, there's nothing more feel-good astrology than having a good time, right? So that's the whole aim here. Now, as you can see from this list, there's a couple of times when there's lots of aspects all happening at the same time. And so what I'm looking at always when I'm doing these preparation notes is which days have got the most planet to planet exact aspects. So for instance, on Monday the 17th, we've got Mars exactly in a square with Neptune. We've also got Mercury in an exact trine to Saturn, just there. We've also got Venus in an exact sextile to Jupiter. I have to say, this is one of my favorite aspects. I actually have sextile between Venus and Jupiter in my birth chart. So I always think we love the aspects that we have in our charts. There's a lovely resonance there. So, these are the ones that I think are the strongest. And you can see that Monday the 17th, Friday the 21st, and Saturday the 22nd have all got a planet to planet, or here we've got the sun in an opposition to the North Node. These are the strongest days. These are the days when something big is hitting for us to process. Aspects are always showing where there are a couple of different energies that need to be energized, let go of, released. There's something to be worked through. And so that's why I particularly, think Monday, Friday, and Saturday are the ones that are getting us to think. But we've also got the moon movements, which are also shaping our week ahead. So we're starting with the moon in Libra, going into the moon in Scorpio on Monday. That's going to take our energy levels into not quite so light, not so social. It's more a time where we are wanting to kind of tuck in a little bit. You might want to pull a comfortable blanket over yourself. I mean, maybe not right now in the blazing heat that we all seem to have in the Northern Hemisphere right now, but it's that time when you want to protect yourself a little bit. You want to be a little bit more personal, a little bit more private as the moon goes into Scorpio. And then on Thursday, the 20th, the moon is going to go into Sagittarius. And this is bringing about a whole new energy, after a few days of looking after yourself a little bit and guarding your energy. When the moon goes into Sagittarius, there's this lighthearted, kind of zippy, sort of slightly eccentric, slightly mad energy that's coming in. The moon in Sagittarius is curious, and exciting, and it really wants to do stuff. It doesn't want to sit still. It wants to explore. And then on Saturday, later on in this week, we've got the moon going into Capricorn, and that's where we're going to take a very sort of practical stance as we end the week. So you've got these moon flows, and that helps us understand that energy. Now, the biggest thing I think that is happening this week is finally we've got the mean North Node going into the sign of Aquarius. Now, you might have already heard that the North Node was already in Aquarius. Well, the reason why I'm synthesizing this is just because there's the true North Node and also the mean North Node. And a lot of charts, especially on astro.com, for instance, the mean North Node is often the one that is showing on the charts, unless you program it in to have the true North Node. This is a true North Node you can see here. Now, the true North Node appears to move backwards and forwards. It's always, it's not moving in one slow trajectory. It's like little steps forward, back, forward, back, forward, back, but it's always moving in that same direction. Whereas the mean North Node is the average point. And so I always celebrate both. I think, once one has gone across, we're starting to move into that new energy. And then when the final the other node moves into that sign, then we're really properly in that sign. And so to me, this is what's really been happening over the last few weeks. We've had to experience a little taster of what the North Node in Aquarius is going to bring for us. But from the 18th of August, that's when it's coming in for good, and it's going to be where our nodes are across Aquarius and Leo for the next 18 months. So this is a really important time. This is a beautiful switchover. Now, to understand the switch, I think it's also important to understand where we've been in the nodal journey. And so we're going to be saying goodbye to the North Node in Pisces. Now, you might be more than happy to let that one go, because Pisces is a sign that absolutely brings in a big mystery. And with that big mystery can come a lot of depth, a lot of intensity, a lot of imagination, but it can also bring in vagaries and confusion and a cotton wool head, where you can't quite access things clearly. And so I actually think the North Node moving out of Pisces is going to help people get very specific about things. I have a feeling that stuff we've not been quite sure about, it's almost like we've been in a dream state for the last 18 months. I mean, the North Node went into Pisces, I think, in January of 2025. And it ushered in this time where we couldn't be certain about what was what. During that time, we had the South Node going through the sign of Virgo, really saying we need to release what is known, and we need to release all those truths that we've been living our life with. Virgo can be quite normal at times. It really likes to understand what's what, what's where, how it all fits together. It wants to know the math, I guess. However, in the last 18 months, we could say the math isn't mathing anymore. And so we've been going in this new place where things maybe haven't made sense. We haven't understood why the usual rules that we would apply just don't apply anymore. They don't work. And so we've been in this no man's land. That's probably the best way of describing it. We've been in this no man's land dream state. But as the mean node goes into the sign of Aquarius on the 18th, that's Tuesday the 18th, that is signaling that dream is over. So it's going to be moving us into a new kind of vibe. And that new vibe is already, it's been building, with Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. The sign of Aquarius has a lot to do with making things fair, making things equal, making things fit a certain pattern. Aquarius is quite complex, actually, because it's ruled by Saturn and it's also ruled by Uranus. And Saturn is, a planet that wants everything to be regulated, sensible. Everything needs to fit a system. It's very systematic. And then Uranus is about consciousness. So like, how do you make consciousness fit a standard? And so this is what, this is one of the challenges that the North Node in Aquarius is going to give us, because consciousness is going to be such a huge thing. In fact, as we had the North Node going through the vagaries of Pisces, it's awakened an understanding of consciousness and dream state and the soul and all sorts of issues of, what is our reality? Is it just this physical reality? Like, I can bang on my mic, I can touch my headphones, I can bang on my table. They're real, they seem real. And yet we've been living in a life where we realize that what is real is actually not. If we were to blow up all of these and look under a microscope, we'd mostly see empty space, allegedly. So what is reality? And of course, now we're not just thinking what is reality, but how can we structure consciousness? So get ready for some big shifts, because during this period in time, the North Node is going to come into opposition with Jupiter. So Jupiter and the South Node will have a couple of conjunctions. And also the North Node is going to eventually come into a conjunction with Pluto. That's going to be a huge thing. So we're getting a nudge in this direction. Our consciousness is getting ready for a shift. And so that's, we might not feel it immediately on the 18th. It's not like, we go and we click the fingers and all of a sudden our reality has changed. But this reality is going to be changing over the next 18 months. And there's going to be periods that feel like it's accelerated and some that feel like they're going really slowly. But the ones that are feeling accelerated, I would say, will be caused when we've got lots of planets going through the fixed signs. So currently we've got Jupiter in Leo. I mean, Jupiter's going to be in Leo until midway through 2027. When we've got planets going through Scorpio, that's going to be activating everything with the North Node. And, I've mentioned in, I don't know which episode it was, but we are going to have Venus and Mercury go retrograde in the sign of Scorpio in October. So that's absolutely going to be bringing in some of these nodal challenges. And then late January and into early February, that's going to be triggering lots of North Node stuff. And then early spring, so late April and into May, we're going to be having lots of things going on as the sun goes through the sign of Taurus. So if you've got anything in the fixed signs, if you've got your angles like me in all of your fixed signs, you're going to be feeling it. If you've got the sun or the moon in fixed signs, in fact, any of your fixed signs planets are going to be encountering energies to do with the North Node. So this is the start. And, we are going to be experiencing consciousness at a whole new level. It's starting to come in. And that's about it, really. No, that's pretty big, isn't it? And you can also see that each day there's a certain amount of moon aspects, where the moon is making a sextile, a conjunction, a trine, a square, or an opposition with another planet. The 16th, that's Sunday, we've got 5 of these energies. So Sunday, I would say, is probably the most emotional day, because when the moon touches other planets and works with other planets, it's working us at an emotional level. So if you're wondering, like, one of the most emotional days, that would be Sunday. It would also be Thursday the 20th, when there's 4 moon passes. And also on the 22nd. The 22nd actually seems like quite a big day. That is Saturday the 22nd. We've got the moon changing signs. We've got the sun in an opposition to the North Node. That's reinforcing that North Node change that I was talking about just before. And we've also got 4 moon energies. So what I'm going to do now is just give you a little taster of what some of these energies are coming up. Before talking specifically about Sunday. So some of the things I think about Monday the 17th, like Mars square Neptune, is an uncomfortable planetary alignment. Neptune is foggy by nature. At its highest expression, I think, is spiritual, is it's merging, the urge to merge. I'm sure we all have that at some level, this urge to merge, where we forget who we are and, like, the boundaries of where we belong just kind of merge into somebody else. That feeling of comfort, I guess, a bit like, a newborn when it comes out, it actually kind of wants to be back in. I remember wanting all 3 of my children out, thinking, I'll be able to protect them more when they're out. And then the moment each of them was born, I just wanted them back inside me, because I realized that I was the only safe harbor. That's how it felt at the time. The urge to merge is real. And so Neptune in a square to Mars is interesting, because Mars brings in boundaries. It shows where we defend ourselves. Mars shows where we take action. And so we're in this, like, Mars is wanting to take action, and yet there's this fogginess, this difficulty to understand what we want. Do we want intimacy or not? And with that, I think there's always this sort of dissipation of energy. Mars finds it hard to retain energy when he's in a hard aspect to the moon and also in a hard aspect to Neptune. It's really hard. It's almost like, if you've got an old device of some sort and you keep charging it up, and yet the battery just isn't, it just can't do it. So we might feel quite depleted on Monday the 17th, really depleted energy and energy sinks. So if you know what sinks your energy, even if it's not a physical thing, if it's like an emotional thing, if it's a phrase that somebody says, or if like somebody is going to call you and you think, oh God, I really don't want this person to call me, because when they call me, I'm always having to go to bed after, or I'm always pissed off when they phone. So, watch your energy sinks on Monday. That's the first thing. Because what happens straight after that is Mercury's going into a trine with Saturn. This is, I think, quite a helpful aspect, but it's not full of the joys of spring. It's quite sobering. Mercury trine Saturn is wanting to get clear about plans, to build something, to communicate what you're building, to really structure things in a thoughtful way that makes sense. And so I think of it as very architectural, because you're building something that you can hang things from, like you might be restructuring your life. You might be writing an essay, and then that essay is you're able to like attach lots of things to it. So there's always a structure, and that structure might be expanding. And then the last aspect on Monday is Venus sextile Jupiter, which I think is about grace and generosity and feeling good just in general. Now, how do these all flow together? Because they all seem very different. Well, I think, there's an energy dissolve going on Monday, where we're not very clear about what's going on, followed by a need for clarity, where we pull our socks up, and we think, okay, look, that felt sucky. I need to make my energy a bit more watertight. How might I do that? So I think the more Socratic you are in your process, the more questions you're asking, I think that's going to help you to build an idea. And then, Venus and Jupiter, I think, is the hopefulness. Once you feel like you've got a plan of action, it's then important to instill some hope into it, because if you stay all serious and plan-like and architectural, you might forget to have a sense of humor, and Venus sextile Jupiter is very helpful in that. But of course, during that time, the moon's going into Scorpio. So, how easy is it going to be? If you need a lot more ease and a lot less introversion, then I suggest you do something specifically funny later on in the day to keep yourself really buoyant. The 21st is interesting. That's a Friday. Venus is in an opposition with Saturn. Have you got that in your birth chart? I have. So I feel like I can talk with some authority about it. I really notice when things go over my Venus opposition Saturn, because Venus opposition Saturn, if we were to look at it as people in your life, you might say Saturn is like the dad, or the teachers, or the authority, or the boss, or the outside world. It's that part of the world that is judging you. Like Saturn he judges. And, some of those judgments can be helpful, because, once he's made a review or an assessment of something, he can give you very good structured advice, but he's not necessarily known for being fluffy. And actually, sometimes he's known for being quite savage and brutal. And in this opposition to Venus, Venus is all about connecting and relating. And Venus is also the young woman, the little girl, the young daughter. Venus is encapsulating, especially in the sign of Libra, we're talking about that part of you that is a young woman. Even if you're a man, by the way, when I'm talking about the planets, all the planets have genders assigned to them in our mythology and in the way we look at planets. It's funny, isn't it? And I live in a country, everything has a gender. It's either masculine or feminine. But Venus in Libra, I think, is speaking to the young, innocent, hopeful, but vulnerable space that exists within you. We all have a childlike person within us. I honestly believe that. That's my strongly held view, that we have a younger version of ourselves that maybe is unresolved, or is ever hopeful to be seen, or to be nurtured, or to feel okay in themselves. And so Saturn in an opposition to Venus here reminds us where we're not good enough. And so this can be quite a painful reaction. And if you recognize that you often doubt yourself, or often don't feel good enough to put yourself forwards, if there is that feeling of, reflecting about whether people care about you or not, because you're really not sure, that sort of doubting of your own goodness. That is quite a painful thing to experience. And obviously, as we go through the week, I'll be talking more about the moon things that are happening. And of course, as I talk through the week, more and more stuff comes out. This is mostly astrological, but I do channel a little bit along the way. I don't know how it happens exactly, but something else happens. So more will come out. But just as a heads up, it's a day when if you have a tendency to reflect on your loneliness, or if you have a tendency to reflect on your not good enough, that Friday could be a little bit of a moment where you go down. So it's important, if you know what keeps you up, and if you know what kinds of people like leave you feeling under the thumb or not good enough, then you've got time to plan how you spend your week. My recommendation for Friday is what boosts you up, what gives you confidence, what can you work at that you feel good at and that you always feel good at. And also, what have you grown and developed about yourself? Because if you can have those things close to hand, or have a reminder of what you've learned and what you've grown and how you've been a master at something, that will really counteract the energies on Friday. And then on Saturday, the big energy is the sun in an opposition to the north node. So this is where the sun connects to the south node, which is all about our past, all about our past learning, our past identities, who we've been in the past. Now, if you've been following me a while, you'll know that we are going through this period of change. And, you know, although we've had some very sort of like big movements over the last few months, and actually the last few years, where it says like, oh, change is coming in. It's like really happening right now. I just think change will always come in at the right speed for us. And there will be moments when the outside world really sort of influences that, and it can come in a rush. However, whatever change goes on, we don't always change our identity straight away. The sun connecting to the south node on Saturday the 22nd is indicating that there might be some identities that you're ready to let go of. So, you know, just because you get your hair cut or just because you lose weight, does that mean that you're fit or have a pixie cut straight away? It sometimes takes a while to catch up in your identity. You know, if you change jobs, you might forget who you are or what you're doing or what you're serving. Our identities take longer to shift through. And so what I see is a predominant theme for Saturday the 22nd is that identity shift, or the awakening that your identity is shifted just from last week or just from the day before. And it's like, wow, I never saw that coming. I never thought I would have that thought about myself. So I think in many ways, this week ahead is all about the discovery and the rediscovery of you. So anyway, with that in mind, let's just have a quick look at Sunday, the 16th of August. Like I said, we've got 5 exact moon aspects. The first one is a moon in a trine to Uranus. I love this because the moon in fact, I've got one. The moon in a trine to Uranus is fast, it's intuitive, it is spontaneous, doesn't want to be planning things particularly, it just wants to be free. Freedom is one of the motifs here. So you want your conversations to be opening, to be creating possibility for you. You don't want the circumstances around your day to be pinning you in place or imposing themselves on you. So this feels exciting. Then the moon is also going into a conjunction with Venus, which is a time when we tend to feel actually quite well. We start to recognize that we're okay. We know we're okay. It's a really good mantra is I am okay, or even better, I'm feeling calm. I'm feeling peaceful. I'm feeling magnificent. I am connected. All those words that help you to just stay positively, calmly, gracefully, feeling at peace in the here and now. So this is a nice now moment. It's also in a sextile to Jupiter, which is even better because I'm great in the now and I know this is just going to amplify. So there's an amplification of those good feelings, which I think is really useful. And then we've also got the moon later on in the day coming into an opposition with Saturn. Now, that's just coming in right at the sort of tail end of Sunday. And it has a sort of energy, a little bit like what I've just described about the Venus opposition Saturn. How I would differentiate it, it doesn't feel like your identity is shifting or you're necessarily having a bad day, but you've had such a good sense of flow that later on that day you get this sense of, did I imagine that? Maybe I've got it wrong. It's just a little bit of self-doubt. So if there was something to work on Sunday, it's know when things are good. That's not to say quit while you're ahead. I would never suggest you do that necessarily. It's not to say what goes up must come down, though I do see some truth in that. It's like, how can you be gentle with yourself when you're tired at the end of the day? How can you just like recognize you've had a good day? And as that shift starts to occur, not make it mean, here comes the bad. You know, you could just make it mean, I've tired myself out. You might just make it mean, you know, this is a moment to just sit and have a bath, or this is a moment to read, or this is a moment to just go for a walk on my own. So use that last flow, that opposition with Saturn, to reflect, but in a gentle way. No high pressured stuff. Like, leave yourself alone, be kind to yourself. So there you go. They're my thoughts for the week ahead. I think it's going to be really good, especially on the back of that very active, big changing consciousness week that we've just had. I really like how Sunday comes in and it's encouraging us to feel good and to rest a little bit as we come to the end of the day. Wishing you a beautiful week ahead. And if you think you might need a little bit of extra care, or you'd like to look at your chart with me, then just get in touch. All of my details are below. You can go to Calendly and invite me to work with you. So take care, have a great week, and catch up with you real soon. Bye for now.